Welcome to the Revenue Blueprint. This is not another sales podcast on tips and tactics. Instead, we focus on unfiltered stories from founders and early stage sales leaders on what it takes to build a successful revenue team. If you get just a little bit of value from this, we ask that you pay it forward by liking, sharing, and subscribing to the podcast. All right, let's get into the episode. Well, welcome back to another episode of the Revenue Blueprint. We have Roderick Jefferson with us today, the CEO of Roderick Jefferson Associates. He was the VP of Global Enablement at Marketo, the head of Global Sales Enablement at Oracle, Senior Director of Sales Productivity at Salesforce, and he had actually created the term sales enablement. So, Roderick, very excited to have you on today.
My absolute honor to be aboard. Thanks for having me.
So your background sounds very big tech, but as I know from talking to you, it's not as big as it sounds. So can you help us fill in the gaps with some of your true startup experience?
Yeah, great question. Let's go behind the curtain. So all the way back to the dinosaur days when I was back at Siebel, we were a little tiny company, less than 1,000 people. And so, but obviously we found a way to make ourselves look much bigger. And even with Salesforce, I came in through a little tiny company called Jigsaw way back when, right? We all smile. You're like, oh yeah, I kind of remember them. Yeah, no one talks about them anymore. But yeah, we were a little tiny startup that got acquired. And the same thing when I went over to Oracle, I was a part of Oracle Marketing Cloud, which was literally the first standalone company inside of Oracle. I've been part of 14 M&A activities over my career, either acquiring or being acquired. So I know what it's like to be the small, and I also know what it's like to be the big Goliath in the room. And I actually prefer, even in my consulting role, prefer working with smaller companies. It's an opportunity to really make an impact with them. And I love building houses.
With your hands or philosophically? I say with your hands or philosophically?
No. You don't want me building anything. My kids tell you when something's broken, they're like, hey, Dad, this is broken. Where's Mom? I am not the handy one in any way, shape, or form.
So I think obviously you have a bunch of pieces on your resume that kind of show your expertise in this sales enablement productivity space. But take us back real quick to what you see as the beginning of sales enablement and how these roles came to be and how the term came to be.
It was actually, and I know I'm going to shock you a bit here, Jason, but I was actually being a smartass when I came up with the statement. I was talking to my sales leader way back 18 years ago when I was at NetApp, and this story went this way. He was saying, we're discounting too much. Throw training at it. Right? Because they couldn't handle objections. We're not getting deep enough on discovery and qualification, and our sales cycles are extending. Throw training at it. We've got a bunch of managers, but no true leaders. Guess what he said? Yep, throw training. So I looked at him and I said, actually, Rob, I think we need more than that. I believe that you train animals, you enable people. And then the light bulb. And he was like, okay, so then if that's the case, tell me what this enablement is. I said, actually, it starts way back at talent assessment and acquisition. Then it's role-specific onboarding. It's now what we call everboarding or continuing education. Throw in a little dash of asset management, coaching and reinforcement for leaders, some real metrics, true metrics, not smiley sheets and butts and seats, but literally revenue-focused metrics. And then finally, succession planning, so we start creating these leaders instead of the mistake that we all do. You take a rock star, what do? You turn her into a manager, but you never actually teach them how to lead. There was the genesis of where enablement came. I was like, we don't want to teach these people how to sit and roll over. It's not about training. Training is a component of it, but it's, as you can hear, it's a small, minute piece of what enablement does.
Where do you, and I know Jason has some thoughts on this, but I'm curious to know, is the right time to start to introduce the idea of enablement in an organization well, maybe let me make that more specific. When is the right time to hire a full-time person to do it? Because everyone, I think
Yeah, I think that's a much broader one. And as a consultant, I think it's probably it behooves you to start with a fractional enablement leader before you hire someone else. And here's why. Just like everything else that we do, kick the tires, right? Figure out what works for you, because, and I always say, if you ask 10 people what enablement is, you'll get 12 answers. And frankly, none of them would be wrong, but none of them would be accurate either, because what we call and what you need in enablement depends upon the maturation cycle of your company, right? If it's on the front end and you're past your MVP and you've got your first salesperson, you've got someone that's handling marketing, enablement looks like probably road testing, if you will, and kicking the tires with that person and going through role play and talking about and working with marketing around the messaging and positioning and getting out the messaging out to the world. And then when you've got 3, 4, 5 salespeople, it shifts again, because now what you normally have is that sales leader who is either the CRO, who's not CRO, excuse me, the VP of, or head of sales, I'll call it, right? Because when you think about most companies, it's founded by either product people on one side or marketing people. Rarely is it sales people, right? But now you've got this person leading sales. They can tell you how they did it, but rarely can they tell you how to scale this. So that's where I think enablement changes again, where now you come in and now it's about building consistency, scalability, and automation. Fast forward, when you head to like that 10 to 15 range, now you really start looking at asset management, deeper level of messaging and positioning, accreditations and certifications, so that you can make sure everybody's saying things the same way. So it's an evolving process that never really ends.
This is, I've never heard it explained like that, and it makes so much sense given that you see such high turnover in the role. And it, like you said, it changes so quickly. I mean, just within a few hires each time, that the person, like you said, if you hired a full-time person for the first phase, they might not be able to do the second, third, fourth, fifth phase, and then that's why you're disappointed. So it's really fascinating. I mean, that's why it seems like it's such a hard role to both do and for a company to hire and make successful, because it changes so much. So thank you for that. I've never heard it explained like that.
But no worries. There's another component to it too. Also, though, I've realized that some of the best people that are enablement practitioners are because we carried a bag previously, right? One, we've stepped in those shoes, and secondly, I think there's an enormous amount of credibility of saying, I've done your job. I was a BDR, I was an AE, I was a sales leader or SE or whatever it may be. So now I speak your language, and I've also lived kind of down that road where you're going. And so we can go work this thing out together, because enablement's not about giving the right answers. And that's another misnomer about it. We are not the fixers of broken things and broken people, right? That's not us at all. IT's got that worked out. Let them have that. Our job is actually to ask the right questions that are going to either create more roadblocks so we can get those out of the way, or to clear the road of all those roadblocks.
Can you, let's dig into that. And I think I would love to hear a story where you were able to ask some maybe simple questions to you, but you were able to ask some of the right questions and poke and prod in the right ways where you made a really big impact. Can you tell us
I can talk about one of the companies that I'm advising with right now. Small company. When I started with them, it was 2 founders, period. And they were former BDRs. And so they had the chops from sales, right? But the questions I was asking them were things like, what's your key differentiation? How do you address competitive advantage here? And how do we stop going out and always focusing on finding or highlighting pain? What if it's about increasing productivity and efficiency? And they went, oh, you're right. It's not always about pain. That was one piece. The other piece was, how do we really, what's not just the culture of what you're building here, but what do you want to be known for and known as? for your company. So again, we can talk about the products and all those things, and we talked plenty about that. What I wanted to now do from an enablement perspective was say, let's connect the dots between you and your ICP, your ideal client profile, right? What does it look like today? But how do we now make sure that we're constantly iterating on that as you grow as a company in size, in offerings, in brand? What do you want this to really be and stand for as we move forward? And these are typically not things that you're having a conversation with your sales leader or with your co-founder. You may, dabble in that, but you need somebody that's an outside extra set of lenses to go, but why? Or that's not really your tagline, is it? Because if it is, it's not saying where you want to go, it's saying where you are now. So it's those kind of conversations where enablement literally becomes a sounding board sometimes. Sometimes we have to pull out the couch and we're the psychiatrist, right? Or we're the counselor. And sometimes you have to help founders get out of their own way.
Yeah. I want to keep going deeper on that. So you asked them this question about who do you want to be, what do you want to be known for? How do they answer that? And how does that tie into sales success?
Oh, it is the linchpin. Think about this with enablement. What we're doing is literally building, go back to my analogy earlier, we're building houses. So you've got the premise of what you want to do and also the product in mind and your at least broad stroke at who your ICP is, right? That's the slab. Now you got to put the frameworking, the black paper, the windows, and the house on. That's where by asking those questions, we're now actually framing the house. Because now we're determining what direction we're going, but more importantly, what direction we're not going to go, right? And because I've been in those small companies, I've been in the mid-size, I've been in the large companies, I can say, you're already on step 6. You left out 3 and 4. And
putting the roof on.
Yeah. Later, it's going to be kind of that huff and puff with the wolf and the pigs. That thing's going to blow over because what you left out was the most important components, and that was going out and having those conversations outside of your ecosystem, because what you got right now is an echo chamber.
But they say what I want to hear. It feels so nice.
But it feels
they love me. I would be
right?
successful.
But the problem is, if you asked, and I said to them, have you actually gone and talked to other founders in your network and asked this one simple question? What should I have seen coming that I didn't? And you get that in hindsight, right? Which of course is 2020. But what you also get is, oh man, I was thinking about doing the same thing. Good thing we didn't step in that hole.
See, I think I could pull on the string forever. I guess, but let's stay on it for a second. So let's get even more specific, right? Like you go out and you have those conversations with other founders. Do you have like any real life stories you can tell, like someone going out and having those conversations and like the change that it made in them, like the realization that they had after they actually faced some of that reality?
Absolutely. Another small company that I am advising with. So what they make is an AI-based simulation for sales folks for role play, right? And so we've all seen them in some form or fashion, and I mean role plays. And what I was asking was, what's different about yours? Why should somebody go and pay for this? And they were trying to shoot way up high on the enterprise side of the house. And I was like, no one's going to need that because I'm your ICP. So what I did was actually introduce them to other folks in my role at different companies, small, mid-sized, and large. I said, go talk to them and see what it would take for them to buy. And more importantly, what value would they get? And so they came back and in real time, they said, you know what, further downstream, they weren't ready for it yet. They didn't even have enough sellers to really cobble this together. And they had a single person who was quote unquote marketing, but they were so overwhelmed, they couldn't help with role plays. Then they went further upstream where they were shooting for, and they had gotten a couple of opportunities, I'll say. But what killed the opportunities was the fact that that's something that's generally done in-house already. I have an enablement team. I don't need you guys. I like what you're doing. And I said, so then let's go back into that mid-size, mid-range company, right? Which is that kind of 10 to 100 million. And I said, what did you find out of why? Not what they need, but why would they need your services? And what impact would it happen? Would it have? And they came back with, it would accelerate speed to revenue because now they get a chance to practice in-house, trip and fall, which we're far more forgiving in-house, right? That was one piece. The second was this thing actually spanned because they were looking at it as an onboarding tool. And what they got was not only for onboarding, but what about for new releases? What about for changes in messaging and positioning? What about when the competitive landscape is impacted by M&A and takeovers? And they went, you're right. So what they came back was, we've got a broader opportunity and span that we can go and have these conversations that make impact. I mean, immediate impact. And they were just kind of looking at it with blinders on. So what those conversations did for them was took off the blinders.
Yeah, I think there's so much value in talking to people to really understand what your ICP is or what your ICP is today, right? Because your product and stuff will change over time where you might be able to serve more people. But I think what you're saying, there's such a valuable lesson there is that you go to market or you think you have your ICP in mind, but you don't really know until you talk to them and you understand why or why not what you're selling or what you ideally will be selling is actually useful to them. And those conversations, the more you can have of those earlier on, the tighter you can get on that calibration of your ICP. And then once you land the first deal, Seth and I talked about like this reference selling, like, oh yeah, you know that deli down the street, I just sold them on this. You're a deli also, you know them, they're having a lot of success with it. You would have success with this as well. And there's social proof because they know the other deli, right? It's like that type of concept is super valuable in the early stages.
Yeah, we hadn't even gotten to that point. You make a really good point is once you get in there and first of all, listen to your ICP because they're going to tell you exactly what they need and what they don't want, right? Not need, but what they don't want. And then once you do that and you hit that first time, and it's amazing that more companies don't do this, ask for proof points. And then even if it's just a basic testimonial that you can put around where would they start, what did the engagement look like, and then what were the outcomes. Doesn't even have to be with all the fact figures and metrics right away, but just what was beginning and what was ending. And to your point, now I can go back to that bank, I can go back to that deli, I can go back to fill in the blank and go, we've done this before, but we have someone that will say it for us, not just us blowing our own horn.
So we talked on like this is one major kind of flaw that founders make or mistake that they make, not talking to customers enough and calibrating these pieces, right? That's an obvious one.
What are you talking to customers?
Yeah. Well, because I have this great idea, and if I don't talk to customers, they can't crush it. So it's successful until I have to talk to them. But what are the other ones that you run across often in your travels that you think are really holding folks back, that you think that we should be yelling from the rooftops to, for the other folks to avoid as they head out on the journey?
Well, we talked about one, and that was the echo chamber. And I want to dig in that a little deeper. And I know we made a joke there that it's because it's what you love hearing. Go and ask people what hasn't worked. Go out and ask and share people, not broadly, you don't have to go deep to where I need an NDA, but hey, here's where we're going. Does this make sense to you? Or have you seen this anywhere else or something similar that didn't work? I don't think we focus on what hasn't worked enough because everyone wants to talk about the positive. And I'm not trying to be negative. What I'm saying is, and my mom used to say all the time, was you learn how to or you learn how not to. Either way, you learn.
I think I've seen that even in my own business this year, right? It's kind of offshoring as a service. And once you understand, I've added this to my discovery process, like, hey, do you have experience working with virtual assistants or offshore teams? And many people do, and many people have had bad experiences. And all of a sudden that opens the conversation up to me to figure out, okay, why was that painful? And helps me sell against that, usually with really nailing down our recruitment process and the onboarding process and taking care of that for them. But if I don't ask that question, or I don't understand what their previous experience is with something similar to what we offer, then I'm either spending way too much time trying to get to that point in my discovery, or I'm selling features that are less important to them than this thing that has already gone wrong in their head in the past.
And then you just hit on a word that struck a nerve, which is selling. I think that far too many founders are focused on selling and not enough on help.
Is it just founders?
No, it's not just founders. I'll just say, let me put the finger quote, sellers. Look, right. There's a difference between, we all have to sell, right? We've all got to close, and we've all got to make sure that we're getting revenue. But it's about the whole process of how you go about it, right? It's the empathy, it's the humanity, I am here literally to partner with you and grow as you grow, as opposed to, a sprint, one-time hit, and I'm gone. We should start thinking about sales as a marathon, right? It's an ongoing, and they're just like every marathon, right? That whole 26 miles. Not all of it is unicorns and rainbows. Not all of it is fun. But when you're done with it, right? And we've all heard of that whole runner's euphoria. That's what happens over and over and over. If you're doing things right with your customers and your clients, if you are focused on making them bigger, faster, and stronger. They're not a logo. They're not a closed deal. They're not somebody to put up on the board. They're not someone that you can ring the bell for, right? What it is really, how can we grow with you as you grow? And how can we build this lifelong bond, if you will? Because we're all talking about customers for life, but nobody actually tells you how to do that.
Well, and this is, rare does anyone speak about this the way you are, right? And even more rarely are the new salespeople starting their careers understanding this, right? Because all they see is the top rep ring the bell. They're like, that's what I want to be doing, right? It's kind of like I talk about a lot, is like the closed deal is just one step on their journey. It's funny, for sales reps, it's the last step. And like, if we can just get them there, we close the deal. It's like, no, this is just, if you can paint the picture of what it's like and already take them down the path of being a customer in their mind, the closed deal is just a step on that path. It's not the end of this journey. But nobody's really talking about this with people. I wish somebody talked to me about it early in their career. I just didn't know.
I would sell. You know what I think it comes down to, Zay? Compensation drives behavior, right? Because they are paid to, quote unquote, close sales. And they don't, in most cases, they don't own that relationship after the DocuSign is signed. What if we looked at it as an author? What if we looked at it as just a chapter in the book, not the whole book, right? It's that first chapter closes. What it does is opens up a new door of relationship. Now you're talking about cross-sell, upsell, renewal, upkeep, all of that the CSMs do.
So I agree, and maybe making this practical. I know we're talking shop, but I mean, you're the guy to talk shop with, so I'm going to learn too. So let's say you have a traditional setup where the sales rep takes it through to close and hands it off to a CSM, right? I mean, that's okay, and that is, most organizations are set up like that. And there's pros and cons with sales reps keeping a relationship after the fact, because it's time investment versus hunting and all this. Right. What is the model that you've seen the best to psychologically have the rep have ownership and relationship with the person, or care about the whole book versus just their chapter? Is there incentive plans, or is it kind of, obviously it comes down from the founder, the way they talk about the business, but is there any tactics that you've seen implemented that really bond all that together?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. I don't have a problem with the process of the seller handing off to the CSM and then stepping back. That's not where the issue is. The issue is there's rarely a warm handoff process
Okay, so let's start with the basics. Okay.
In theory, what if, and here's to answer your question, where I've seen it work best is where you actually, before the close, when you're down at that last stage and you know that you are the chosen vendor, you're moving forward, that's when you bring in the CSM.
What if you bring him on even earlier?
Or even earlier, right? As a part of the team and not this unknown lab coat that suddenly shows up. And look, I've built this relationship with you. I've got trust in you. We've got a relationship built. Who's this person? I don't know them.
Right. Oh, you thought you were marrying me? No, you married that person. No, you're never going to see me again. You're like, I stopped answering your call. I called you every day. Now you call me if I don't answer your call.
We were, proverbially dating. Now all of a sudden, I don't know this person. I'm not going off with them, right? I've got no relationship here. What if we brought them in earlier and made them a part of that last mile, if you will?
I love it.
And then you also have an opportunity for them to come in and go, okay, once we agree and we're going to move forward completely, here's what's going to happen. What about giving them a blueprint? Here's what's
validating that the salesperson is actually telling the truth, because they're going to be listening, saying, wait, I can't do that. You're going to hate me once we get married.
Salespeople never lie. Never. I won't even say lie.
They're optimistic.
They're creative.
Yeah, rosier than reality.
Exactly. No, and that's great. To your point, it validates what the company and that person is buying. And then what it also says is, here's a blueprint. Here's what's going to happen, because based upon experience of what's worked well. And let's be honest, there's been a couple things that haven't worked well, but here's where we got through those things. So we're also prepared for that. So then the prospect at that point, soon to be customer, doesn't feel like they're a guinea pig or they're hoping that this is going to work on their dime. You give them that and talk about credibility. We've been down this before. We know how the movie ends, right? A couple of rodeos and picnics and all that, the other analogy. But what it does is it gives them that warm, fuzzy blanket that we wrap them in to say, you know what, you're not in this. We're going to continue giving you the great level of service. And my goal is to build similar level of respect, responsibility, and relationship as you have with the salesperson. And that will continue. I promise you won't be my best friend 90 days before it's time for you to renew.
What about, it sounds so obvious, right? But I'd say that's the minority of companies selling or doing even anything close to this. Like you said, it's almost lucky if there's a warm intro made. Any specific compensation or tactics, maybe around compensation for sales reps to care, other than just getting the close, right? Because even the introduction to the CSM is still the sales rep is doing it to close the deal, right? Is there any other tactics to kind of pay them to care? Is it linking it to renewal, or what have you seen work?
I haven't seen it work well.
Okay.
From a compensation, I'm the first to be honest, and it's because, again, traditionally they are paid to close. Now, where the compensation comes in strongest is with that CSM, where they're now introduced early, and they're also compensated to make sure that there is the handoff as well as a true implementation plan. So I don't know that we're going to be able to, at least personally, I haven't seen where there's been a great focus on compensating salespeople for the handoff. And that's probably why it hasn't worked well.
Yeah, it's one of those forever problems, right? Which whenever you have something like that, you can solve it tactically, but also sometimes you can solve it culturally by trying to, like, through hiring and building a customer first organization, you can build some of that culture in of people that care about it, even if it's not their necessarily responsibility or tied to their paycheck. But the more you try to design around it, the more complex it becomes. And I think all three of us know how much time is wasted on complex compensation plans. But I think that concept of the sooner you can introduce the CSM or the relationship manager, right, but even before the close happens, it builds extra rapport with that and trust with that person that's going to be handling things. And I think it's really hard in early stage companies because you're really trying to optimized for everyone being as productive as possible. So you have like these tight handoffs where there's not much overlap, but
you've got less people to deal with too.
But I think if you could, if you found a way to measure all the intangibles of this at some point, you would probably find really positive correlation with who's handed off, clients that are handed off sooner or introduced sooner to the LTV of that client.
We are talking about 1 hour, maybe 2, if you bring them in even earlier, of time on a meeting, or even less. Right. And the CSM is going to have a better like expectation setting. I mean, I was half joking that the sales reps were lying, but it's also about like setting the relationship up for success and setting expectations across the board, right, for everybody involved. It also makes you, I think, feel a little bit like a bigger company than you probably are, right? Early stage startup, it's like, oh, everyone does everything. It's a mess. But it's like if you actually have this seamless process, the client feels more like, oh, these guys really have their act together. Even if you only had one sales rep and one CSM, they could make it feel really like, wow, these guys are professional. I'm in good hands, even though they're tiny. So they have their act together.
Well, it also shows that, and a lot of companies talk about being customer focused, customer centric, right? What a better way to show it? Because that is the one place that becomes, dare I say, a moat, right? For most customers is we were great. We were happy enough to say yes. Now we said yes. Now what happens? If you, to your point, the earlier you bring in that CSM, the less they have to worry about what's next, because it doesn't even really feel like a what's next. It's just kind of a continuation of that same marathon that we were talking about earlier.
Yeah. So we talked about a lot about what founders get wrong or like misconceptions of early stage sales. Is there anything difficult that you think investors need to hear about early stage sales team?
Is there anything investors get wrong ever?
Allegedly. I work with them closely, so no.
Perfect. Moving right along, Jason.
No, you know what I the one thing I would say about investors is they seem to think that enablement is for big companies. I don't need that, right? I've got people down, my sales leaders are going to do that. No, they're not. Because most sales leaders have never been taught how to actually coach in all actuality. Or they're leaning so much on the way that they've done it and what they know that, again, blinders get put on. So what I say to investors in regards to being a fractional enablement leader, what I am is not just another set of eyes and hands. What I am is literally someone that can come and help connect the dots between sales, marketing, product marketing, the founders, the leaders, and the sellers. Now it's someone, and also it's an outside voice. I don't have a horse in the race. My job is simply to make everybody better. And I don't come in with a mindset of hierarchy either, right? Sales is what is the sun. Well, sort of, but at the same time, what happens if you don't have messaging and position that's accurate? What if you don't have a strong MVP or product in place? What if the ICP is off? What if the IEP is off, the ideal employee profile? All these things it requires for everybody to connect.
Yeah. So you've studied sales training a lot, and you've seen it, you've seen it evolve over the last 15, 20 years. But I think since COVID and people going remote or hybrid or back to office, whatever it is, there's probably been some of the most rapid change in how people need to think about sales training. So over the last just 2 or 3 year period, what changes have you seen in effective sales training? What are people doing now that is most effective that might have been different than 5-10 years ago?
Oh God, so much. Let's start with 5 years ago. We were still looking at talking heads over PowerPoint, right? And we would do it for 15, 20, 30 minutes. Now, everything is about knowledge bites. How do we shorten this? We're an Instagram world, right? And we're a microwave society. How do we shorten this into what I call knowledge bites, which is those 3 to 5 minute nuggets that are single topic? The second piece is the infusion of more and more accreditation and certification and practicing in-house and the kind of tools that have come together and allowed you to do this. The other piece is the revenue intelligence tools, things like Chorus and Clary and Gong and Showpad, that now you can do this all in-house. And it'll now, with the infusion of, and I'll get to AI in a moment because that has changed the whole world, but it's infused in AI. There used to be, 5 years ago, there were kind of 6 categories. There was the learning and content management systems, things like, Cornerstone and HighSpot, Docebo, Lessonly, et cetera. Then you had the prospecting and reporting tools, the HubSpots, the LinkedIn Navigators, the ClickSenses, those kinds. Then came the automation tools, marketing automation tools, the Eloquas, the HubSpots, Marketos, et cetera. We've always had a million communication tools, right? Whether it be playbooks, podcasts, digital sales rooms, et cetera. Then came the sales enablement platforms, the Allegos and MindTickles and HighSpots and those. And that was pretty much how you aligned your technology resources, and you threw video and on top of all of that. No mas. Now it's about leveraging AI to increase efficiency and productivity, right? And I think this is really helping to connect the dots between sales and marketing more, which has always been kind of a distress relationship, if you will, because now it makes marketing more inclusive in the sales cycle, because now AI can help streamline lead scoring, right? On the backside, it's about making our sellers more productive by automating those mundane tasks, personalized sales coaching, and helping to really teach leaders how to be a coach versus just a manager. It's also helped by creating efficiency inside of the sales process by making the focus more on the buyer's journey versus trying to shoehorn them into your sales process, methodologies, sales stages, and selling motion. What about things like automated customer communications, right? That have all come, freeing up time for that CSM on the back end, like we've talked about, to focus on more kind of complex and strategic tasks. And then finally, real-time analytics. 5 years ago, my team, we'd run a boot camp. It could take a day to kind of tabulate all of the feedback and the scores. Now, it's done in no time flat. So now there's far more time. And we haven't even talked about the availability of all of the content and context out there. And notice I didn't say ChatGPT one time, did I?
Not until just now. What would be, maybe on that, let's say you have 2-3 reps. It's all remote, right? And you're selling, everything is starting to pick up some momentum. Maybe you're the founder, you have a little bit of a sales experience, some leadership, enough to not need a sales leader quite yet. You got the few reps running, maybe a few SDRs. What's kind of your tech stack look like right now, if you could cherry pick what you would use if you're in that person's shoes?
The sales and prospecting reporting, you've got to figure out that piece first, your CRM, et cetera, because that's where.
Do you have a preference? I don't know who pays you. Do you have a preference in a CRM for a small?
I tend to not throw out names because then I'd use
don't either. I'm going to put you on the spot. Okay.
And go, why didn't you talk about us?
Okay. So there's a handful of different.
Yeah. And you know what? I think it depends upon, again, the size of the company. Further down, I love Salesforce, but I think Salesforce is too big when you're small, right? And too expensive. Let's be honest. And I'll just put that out there, right?
Okay, so maybe instead of the names of the brands, what tools do you have in place when you're in the early days? Let's say 2-3 SDRs, 2-3 AEs, 1 founder selling.
I'm good with that. It's that prospecting and that sales reporting piece. Otherwise, things are all over the place, right? You also need to have one centralized location. I don't care if it's a content management system or it's a G drive, but it has to be in one place. Because salespeople are not going to go into 17 different places. Now, that creates its own problem. And then I want to be very clear. When you have that G drive or that one setup, who owns...
I was going to say, it's so easy to keep organized.
Keep it organized. But
V1.1.2.newest.
Yeah, who owns version control? Right? And that's where you've got to make sure that your connection between sales and marketing is together. and locked in, right? So that shared content drive. Also, I think you've got to have some form of recorded versions of what I'll call gold star content. If it's your first call pitch, if it's your messaging and positioning, whatever it is, you've got to have something that is kind of your North Star, and preferably not been done by a sales leader. Get it from your best salesperson. Why? Because we're going to look at each other and go, hey, I want to be like that person. And we all know who the rock stars are, right? And so it's important to have those recordings in place so that you can have it.
All right, so let me pause right there, see if I can summarize. We have a cadencing or sequencing tool for calling, emailing, LinkedIn, whatever your prospecting tool is. We have a CRM separate from that, or maybe the same if it's together. Mm-hmm. We have a repository for content that it can be extremely expensive and robust, or it can be super lightweight like a G Drive. Key to that is I guess all of it should be who's managing what and keeping it in order. You have a
recorded call.
Well, you have a call recording, demo recording, whatever it might be, mm-hmm. A tool for, I guess, training purposes, gold star content. I guess where I got caught there is I hadn't heard something for like the playbooks. Is that
that's what I was just about to say. Got it, the playbook that ties it all together so you get consistency and scalability. That was my last piece.
Everyone always asks me where the playbook lives. Is it anything? Use Notion, or I know you didn't want to say brands. Is it a Google Doc? Have you found a separate tool that stands out that's worth saying?
Yeah, there is one. It's Playbooks with an X, right?
Playbooks with an X.
Smaller company, Playboox. So
use promo code Roderick Jefferson. One word, all lowercase.
No, you know why I like them when they're smaller? Because they get hands-on and they literally dig into the meat of how things work here, why things work, and then to your point earlier, they don't make things complex. I've seen playbooks, you go, how am I supposed to follow this, right? And I think that's why playbooks have kind of gotten a semi-bad name, and they've always been seen as just an asset, right? And I don't think it's just an asset. I think it's literally the foundation and the blueprint of the things we talked about earlier, the onboarding. What does that look like in the whys? Then how do you say things a certain way, and why are they said a certain way? Helping out that FLM, that first line manager who, again, as we said earlier, may not know how to coach or haven't coached before, right? And then it also, I think, helps to reinforce that humanity and that empathy part of being a leader, because sometimes, well, let's be honest, that falls off the table. And then finally, what it does is it gives you a guided selling tool, not just an asset that is a one-time thing and you don't go back to it. No, this is something that you're constantly going back to, and it becomes a living, breathing asset versus just a document.
I have one follow-up question on that, and there's a couple other things we got to get to before we end today. But on this thing, right, I've struggled with this and seen others struggle with who owns this content or this collateral between sales and marketing, right? Because marketing never quite understands the customer enough, and sales doesn't understand how to design something that looks good. So these early stage teams, you have a handful of salespeople, maybe one or two marketers. Who owns the collateral in your mind?
Me. Sorry. You triggered me there.
Let's. God, this is such the elephant in the room, and I love this question. The answer is yes. Right, and I'm not trying to be diplomatic here. I think from a messaging and positioning perspective, the creation of and all of the assets should be owned by marketing. However, the tone, the delivery, and the context needs to be owned by sales. So if you can get them together, it's the same reason, marketing says, we give you guys 1 million leads and you never use them. Sales says, because all your leads suck. That's where that whole enablement role, whether it be in-house or as a fractional, we come and sit down and we ask the question at the same table together. Imagine that. Have you ever actually defined what an SQO or an SQL is to marketing? And most of the time the answer is no. Well, they should know. No, they shouldn't. Marketing. How many times have you actually sat in and listened to calls to see how messaging and positioning is actually working or not working in the real world? When's the last time you did that? That is where enablement starts to connect those dots and starts to at least plug holes of those silos. I can't say we completely shut it down, but we at least start to plug in the holes in those silos.
And that sounds like a bit of a leadership. Well, it's very much a leadership and culture of a founder, right, or CEO, or to get those people at the table, because they're not.
I don't think so. I'll disagree on that.
No, really, okay.
I don't think it's CEO, because CEO is so focused most of the time on the big, trying to be strategically tactical. Rarely works as a small CEO. That's where I think you need that person that owns change management, and that is that enablement person. We are that orchestra master, if you will. Give me more brass, give me more strings, give me more woodwind percussion. Now I can turn all that noise and chaos into a beautiful sheet of music if I can get everybody to the same table. And again, because I don't have a horse in the race. I'm not leaning sales, I'm not leaning marketing. What I'm saying is, if we don't communicate, collaborate, then orchestrate together, nothing works out well.
You know, I think this has been, I'm learning a lot selfishly. I love this stuff.
Thanks.
I don't hear the word enablement without putting sales first, and sales enablement, right? It's never lived without sales. But what I'm taking away from this is sales it shouldn't be called sales enablement. There's certainly sales enablement. There could be marketing enablement.
It's revenue enablement now.
It's just enablement, revenue enablement. Even revenue links you to sales almost a little bit too much. It's more of like, it's business enablement.
Yeah, it's go to market. It really is.
Yeah, it's fascinating. It's just with the inventor of the word, it's now has the stigma of only sales enablement, which is like living.
Time for my baby to grow up.
Yeah, your baby needs to grow into it.
All right, one other question I want to touch on is, I think this is for managers out there that, whether they're new or just trying to improve some of their communication skills. Roderick, I know you have the 3-point question framework. So I think this is useful for managers, also in relationships. I was telling my wife about this last night. So Roderick, can you please share that 3-point framework with us?
Sure. Thanks again. It's a single 3-point question that I always ask, whether it's starting with a one-on-one, whether it's a team meeting, or whether it's peers of other executives. And it goes this way. Do you want me to listen? Do you want me to coach? Or do you want me to fix? And the reason that I phrase it that way is, do you want me to listen? Sometimes people just want to get things out of their head. But unfortunately, as leaders, we are natural fixers, and we go right into that fix. And that may not be what they need, right?
Shut up. I just need a therapy session.
Sometimes we do. I need to hear it outside of my head. Is this crazy when it comes out of my mouth? The second is, do you want me to coach? You have far more experience, almighty one, right? If you will, of I've tried these things. What have you seen differently or tried differently? Third is, I just need a fix. I've tried everything I know how to do. Just tell me what you've seen work and not work. And what that single 3-part question does is it does 2 things. One, it shows the other individual that this is their time and it's all about them. And secondly, it shows that you are telling me what set of ears to put on, and I know what is the greatest value that I can give back to you.
Yeah. It's great. It's like,
don't try it with your spouse.
See, because I actually, and I know John JB was saying this worked for him. I think it's going to work well for us, just because of this all-fine conversation why I think it's going to be really effective. But I think it's, again, you have to approach it in the right way. And right, like, as entrepreneurs, right, and leaders ourselves, it's hard not to take that same business approach to basically everything you do. So I think there's a lot of value in that framework. Roderick, the last question that we like to get everyone out on is, what is one piece of advice or lesson that you think about almost every day?
Oh, great question. every single day, and that is that I am here to make others bigger, faster, and stronger, and the world does not revolve around me.
It sounds like someone that has had life experiences on both sides of that, and probably has some kids too that shaped some of that perspective as well.
I would say so. Yeah. It's, I think when you get to a certain age and stage in life, you quickly realize that I have far more sunsets behind me than sunrises in front of me, and I want to enjoy everything. And when you finally get to the inflection of where your passion and your purpose actually comes together, it's actually easier to live that than it just sounding like it was a cool little soundbite. It's literally how I live every day.
That's amazing. Well, Roderick, thank you so much for your time today. This is awesome. I'm sure we could keep pulling on some of these strings and go deeper on some of these topics. We might do that at some point, but thanks again. This was a great conversation.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it, guys.
Thank you, Roderick.
Awesome. Take care.